It's 21 minutes past 8 and you're listening to The Breakfast Show on Ngaarda Radio. A new book is shining light on the tragic truths of Western Australia's youth detention system, telling the story of 16-year-old Yamaji boy Cleveland Dodd, who died inside Kasarina Prison's Unit 18. He was the first child to die in youth detention in the state's history. A new book by youth justice advocate Gerry Georgatos tells the story of the boy behind the headlines and the system that failed him. Is called Cleveland Dodd, Child of the Desert Sunrise. Gerry Georgatos spoke with me.
My name's Gerry Georgatos, and I've just authored a book in consultation with Cleveland Dodd's mother about Cleveland Dodd and the boy behind the headlines, and everything about the justice system and what let him down and everything that was foreseeable that would have kept him alive. So it's a hard-hitting book, but it's also 300 conversations over the last 2 years with his mum and families in Ngaarda, Laverton, Kalgoorlie and Geraldton and elsewhere. As a Yamaji boy, he'll always be a Yamaji spirit, and his mum wanted memory of him other than what has come through the media thus far, and also wanted questions raised and burning questions at that about what went so dramatically and drastically wrong with the boy she expected would come back to her. Didn't. And her birthday is on the 11th October. On the 12th of October, she got a call that morning because they asked her birthday that the boy was gone.
And your book describes Cleveland as a boy, not a headline. What did you learn about who he really was beyond the media report while working with his family and community?
Well, one thing I should say is I never knew Cleveland. Cleveland came to my attention on the day he died. I was called dramatically at 7 a.m. in the morning after more than likely his passing at 1:30 that morning. He was put on life support thereafter. And I was actually told by someone inside the system high up that a boy has died in Banksia. A boy has died in Unit 18. So at that stage, I thought he had died. He'd been put on life support once he got to the hospital. Whoever decided that. And so the family could come and pay last respects to him in that week. On Thursday, 7 days later, 19th of October, 2023, 10:14 p.m., I was in ICU. The family had asked me to come in on that last day. I had actually got the shackles off the father, who, through Roger Kulkue, called and he organised for him to be unshackled so he could hug his child's unresponsive body in bed, and family had asked me to come up. I came and I stayed with them to the end till the last passing of his mortal breath. At 10:14 p.m. he passed his last breath, and I never forget that. His family, his parents just collapsed on his body. They all forged as one. That's a memory that will never leave me. And I texted Roger that at 10:14 p.m, a few minutes later, that is, I texted Roger Cook that he had passed. And, and thanked him for taking the shackles off the father so they could all embrace freely. And, so I got to know the family, father and mother, extraordinarily well because of these sad, tragic circumstances that brought us with us. So I've lived Cleveland through his mother particularly, and other members of families, grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, teachers of schools he'd been to. He was a creative boy, but he was a boy of the desert. That's why I've called the book Child of the Desert Sunrise. He was born in Kalgoorlie. His mother had been born in, like father, in Laverton, and he grew up in Kalgoorlie, grew up in Laverton, he grew up in Ngaarda. He loved the red earth, the desert countries, the trickle of the sand under his feet and the riddles that the desert, plays on you and questions that he puts. Mum had favourite memories of him collecting wood 6, 7, 8 years of age with the elders who he respected. She talks with empathy of his stories of his love for others and his support for others, and she remembers meeting a homeless man that he was taken by and asked his mum for change. They gave him no change the Dean had. Then he asked his mother, if you got a $50 note, we'd give him a $50 note. She goes, son, if I had a $50 note, it wouldn't last long for me, or whatever, right? She goes, we're poor. But she gave what she got. And he always looked out for people that way. He was an artistic boy. He loved to paint. And the last painting that we got out of Unit 18 that was brought to us, his coffin was painted with his last artwork, all 4 sides. And when he was lowered into Ngaarda earth, he was lowered with a coffin with his artwork on it. And I was there, and it was sad to see that boy so young with so much talent. He was very artistic, and I think when you see the eloquent colours and the vibrant colours, the aqua blue and the turtle that he put in that artwork, it's just incredible. He had a tremendous skill, but he was very musical too. He could play the guitar, and he just loved music. He had all this potential. He was actually a merit-based student, not a student. Davidson and his teachers loved him, and letter was read out. His teacher at Davidson Primary School to the Coronel School. But yeah, that describes him in a nutshell. He was a boy with a lot of potential, a boy expected to go places, a boy that was doing well at school too. He went a little bit searching for his father's lineage and identity. The dean and the mum and the father separated. He was the eldest child and only child of the father, and the eldest of 6 children of the mother. And he loved his siblings very much, adored them. And he went wayward with aberrant behaviour in Mikasara and dropped out of school, which was, a mistake. But he was so keen to map his father's identity and his paternal side of the family, their history, and be part of them too. So he loved them dearly. He just loved family. And it was, hard for him inside Banksia. The last 86 days in Unit 18, he spent 75 of them in 23 hours of isolation.
And you've spent years advocating for youth justice reform. What did writing Child of the Desert Sunrise reveal to you that policy reports and inquiries have failed to capture?
Well, one thing was the book is also forensically about what went wrong in the system. So we want to see what's foreseeable. And many said to the boy, we will lose someone soon. And it came to pass. And then we lost another one here. It has to be taken, as a truth and understood. We've got to stop saying this is a black problem, because what we're saying is these kids, it's a black problem that they're aberrant. It's a black problem that they're, committing crime, that it's part of their DNA because they're being left behind. The problem is that it's not a black problem, it's not a brown problem, it's not a white problem. The problem is that Banksia Hill and all prisons, 17 juvenile detention prisons throughout Australia and 115 adult prisons throughout Australia, that's 132 prisons all up, adults and child prisons, they're the problem. The carceral state is the problem. They're non-transformative. They're non-empathetic. They're punitive and not life-transformative. They're not restorative. They use buzzwords like rehabilitation. Doesn't happen, Marli. Doesn't happen. If it happened, he'd be alive. He'd be with us. He'd be returned. Many of these kids will not be going on to adult incarceration. 70% of the children of Banksia go on to adult incarceration within the first year after turning 18 years of age. That's a stat I have from the Department of Justice, from the Corrective Services mob. That's dramatic. That's terrible. That's horrific. The fact that we have a Unit 18 means that Banksia Hill doesn't work, and then they're being shuffled off and segregated at Unit 18 till they go to adult prison. And then that's a double fail. So 100% of the kids at Unit 18 will go to adult prison, with the exception of Cleveland, who suffered a greater tragedy than otherwise. But let's not forget that the second boy who died within that year, so there's 2 boys that have died by suicide in Banksia Unit 18, and that was at Banksia Hill. That was at Banksia Hill within all the promises of change. It's not enough to just keep them busy in there. You've got to change their lives. You've got to give them something to look forward to what they come out. And they can, it's taken a while to get, and we still haven't had it up, the promise demographically of that pastoral estate that they can do, mustering and horse riding and all sorts of activities, Maramanu in the Kimberley. And that hasn't happened yet. It's 5 years of promising it's going to happen. It just hasn't happened yet. That will help some kids in the Kimberley region doing some things to better themselves. But we've got to actually make these bastions of support community resourced, heavily resourced, intensely resourced with personnel, staff or mentors and experts and the like, not set up failure by getting some people tokenistically to help a dozen people at a time. You've got to have one-on-one nurture. It's got to be equivalent to what a carer setting is on the outside. That's the cultural understanding of every culture, black, brown and white. You've got to support them through nurture. And you've got to have expertise to do it. You just can't have anyone doing it, which is what we rely on. They had guards at Unit 18 pretending that they were mentors. carrying on as if mentors because they trusted their guards to follow the system operationally, and they didn't have the education or the skill sets or the field work to do what that boy needed, what all the boys and girls actually needed. I worked in Banksia Hill for 8 weeks during the COVID quarantine with Megan Cracker and Marli Georgatos, my daughter, and we were called in. I was seconded by the Department of Corrective Services and the Minister at the time, Frank Logan, and this was 2020. Because they had the COVID quarantine, everybody was, non-essential workers were quarantined there. And the staffing levels were at the record lowest ever. They were having incidences and potential and all sorts of conflicts between guards and kids all the time. And in the 8 weeks that I was there, I started the day they called me in. I de-escalated 100% of all potential incidences. We had harmony, we had peace. I worked restoratively to halve the population of the girls from 18 to 7 in 8 weeks, so more than half it. And there was a turnover of 31 prison entrants at that time, of which I worked with 30 of the 31 prison entrants. I went in there every day of those 8 weeks because I knew we might never get this chance again, which we didn't, that they just wanted to use us to do what we needed to do then, and I was happy to be part of that to help those that I could. But, you know, I went in Anzac Day, I went in weekends, I went in there all Easter in that period. Just worked with the boys and girls across the prison, and we had rapport residents. There was no conflicts, and the guards were quite moved by it and all that they stepped back. I didn't work from an office. I refused to work in the admin office. I wanted to work in the compounds, wanted to go to the cage, intensive support unit, just didn't want anyone over our shoulders. It was a beautiful experience, and that's the way it needs to be done. Dynamic partnerships, and that's both a cultural understanding of black, brown and white. So the problem is the system. It's carceral, it's punitive, it's barbarous, and it's punishing. That doesn't change people. In general, they come out worse than what they went in.
Absolutely. And the inquest into Cleveland's death has exposed deep systemic issues. And from your perspective, what immediate steps should WA take to protect other young people still in detention today?
Well, what is going to work will work from the first day. This myth about saying it's going to take months to transform and change things around, that just means it's not going to work. If it doesn't work on the first day, it's not going to work at all. I went in there the first day and we worked from the first day. You've got to deliver from the first day what you're going to deliver down through the short and long haul. And it's got to work. If it doesn't work first day, throw it away. It's not happening. Not going to happen. What we've got to do is actually close Unit 18, because unless they want to support them properly, and what they need to do is actually have one-on-one nurture. The average number of kids in Unit 18 is about 12 kids. If we can't help 12 kids at any one time, what hope do we have to help 50 or 100 or 1,000? If we haven't got it right for 12 kids, then we don't know what we're doing. And that's what we've got to understand. In the first instance, we've got to get an education into all these people vested with the permissibility to assist and support young ones to understand that they've lived unfairness and disadvantage from the beginning of life. If they don't understand that, they're going nowhere fast. That most of these kids have had insufferable lives, that they've seen sufferings that most household Australians don't have. Some of these kids are orphans. Some of these kids are street kids. Some of these kids don't have a safety net. Some of these kids have both parents in jail. We've got to actually understand that and work with that. We've got to put in post-custody supports or alternatives to prison or alternatives to remand, and put in intense merit-based individuals who will work intensely with kids psychosocially and psychoeducatively and with love and rapport. Academize the language all people want, but I usually talk with love and rapport and spread the love. You give love, you get love. You be with them, you listen. I know I talk a lot, but when I'm with them, I talk little. You've got to listen to them and uninterrupted. You've got to let them pour out their story. You've got to let them tell everything that they've got to. And if they realise you're listening to them, they will take out everything that's been internalised and penned. And that's the first port of call. But you need expertise, expertise to get in there. Then we can make things therapeutic. Then we can make things restorative. We've got to turn these places into bastions of love and into bastions of carer settings and into cells that they're not locked behind bars, but they've got doors and a key, into places that they can yearn to leave this secure circumstance facility better than what they went in. But I'd like to see the support on the outside. I'd like to see them basically on community orders and supported in psychosocial community resource facilities and resource centres that they don't have to be locked up in, that they can go to and fro and have that care setting to support them right throughout the state. The Nordic models work. That's Norway, Finland, Scandinavia, Denmark. And the Dutch have actually closed 23 prisons in the last 7 years and transformed them into psychosocial facilities and places of education, nurture, support, mentoring and all that. And in Norway, I'll tell you a statistic that's startling that we have to listen to. 90% of children in Norway who offend once do not offend again. 90% of children in Western Australia who offend once, twice, 3 times will offend again. Some of them 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times. So what is it that we're doing wrong and what is it that they're doing right, the Norwegians? I would say one thing to Roger Cook, one thing to Anthony Albanese as the leaders of the state and the nation, and also to Susan Ley, the leader of the opposition, and to other leaders of parties. They should get on a plane. The best money they could spend is buy a ticket, economy, like normal human beings, but they can go first class if they want and rule the system. They can go first class or economy, but even if they go first class, go to Oslo, go to Norway, go to its justice departments, see these prisons, how they work. In Norway, there's also the adult prison of Bastøy Island Prison, which is a tremendous facility changing lives. And do what they do. Their record speaks. Bring back the knowledge from there. And I know all this stuff, but, if they can hear it from them and then follow it through, work with what works, what they'll be doing is validating lives and changing lives. And that's the best thing that they could do. And the book talks about all this. The book talks forensically about what went wrong, what should have occurred, what we're still doing wrong, what we must change. And it also speaks through Cleveland. So I won't preempt the book. We rushed it at this stage because I promised to get it out in terms of if I can just say, the anniversary of his passing and also of his burial on November 1, when even that day on November 1, the funeral was stopped because they wouldn't bring the father from Greenock Prison in Geraldton to Mikasara. And I said that the spirit of this young boy will not rest till we get his father with the mother to lead him his burial, to dreaming, to whatever it is that young one will go through. And everybody said it couldn't be done. The journalists that were up there said it couldn't be done. The government said they're not going to allow the father to come because they had safety concerns that there might be a riot. And I pushed through, hassled Roger, hassled everybody and the police, and we got it overturned. I said, if it doesn't happen, Roger, there will be a riot. And WA will be haunted by this boy in a mortuary for weeks on end, further than what he's already waited to go to where he needs to go. And he needs his father and mother at the helm. And he was to be buried at sunrise, and we buried him at sunset. And but the spirit of the boy stood strong. And I hope the spirit of this boy is exemplified through this book. And it's 200 pages, and I've done the best that I can to rush it in 10 weeks. All the publishers accepted it, but don't get their publications out for about 18 months. They work on them. And I said, we can't wait till 27, 28. We can't wait. We need to get it out. So we've done a few runs ourselves pre the launch, and the first run sold out. So a lot of the orgs and the ARCOs and the ALS and them have bought the book. And if anyone wants to contact me, you guys have got my details. I'm happy to mail it through. And they just write to me or call me and we go from there. But the more that know, we just can't lose this boy and the remembrance of Australians and the findings of the coroner's court and all that and all the revelations as we have with the past, to just a period of time that we argued hard, as we did for Miss Dew, as we did for Mr. Ward, as we did for Miss Mandajar, as we did for Mr. Phillips, as we did for so many, as we've done for so many across the country, as we did for Marunji Dunaji, as we've done for Mr. Dungay, as we've done for Miss Day, as we've done for all those 600 plus that have gone too soon, too early, and unlawfully, and psychologically injured, emotionally battered, and invalidated. And we've got to change the system. We've got to make sure that the traction we've got for Cleveland DODD continues, and there's a multitude of voices that continue to argue in the years to come through his spirit, and let that spirit command change to not see what's still foreseeable that will happen, because it's still foreseeable that we will lose others.
It's a very powerful message. You've said this book is about honouring Cleveland's life as much as confronting the institutions that failed him. How did you balance those two in your writing?
Well, I've been a very flowery writer all my life, and someone ultra empathetic, and I've been considered radical. And I was a prolific writer till Parkinson's took hold of me with the disease, and now I type with one finger. But I typed this book with one finger. Otherwise it would have been 400 pages. But I did that because I had to do it. the balance, that will be for yourselves to judge whether there's a balance there or not, whether I'm partial or impartial, because I spent the last 2 years with Nadine and many other injustices and cases, and, I fought deportations, immigration, all stuff that needs to happen to maintain human rights. I've fought for the homeless. I've fought, for injustices and for transformation in prisons, juvenile and adult, and for 25 years with prisons and stuff like that. I'm 63. I fought 50 years for all sorts of barrel startings, asbestos, melanophilia, and the victims that were left behind by the factories and places that used to flog them till they have no protections in the 1970s. So my life is just hardwired that way. So balance. I think there's balance there because I step in everybody's shoes, but it's for others to judge that. But I'm not going to claim that I haven't been impartial, or that I've been impartial. My bias is to Cleveland and to his memory. My bias is to the fact that he died on the back of foreseeability. My anger, even though I forgive, I'm a redeemer, is that I need people to take, Cleveland needs people to take, his mother needs people to take, his families need people to take, First Peoples need people to take, all Australians need people to take accountability for what they do and not do in the prison system, in the police system, in the internal affairs of both these bastions, in government, ministers and premiers to stop the doublespeak and the forked tongue and just speak freely and honestly and apologise when they need to and just speak like human beings. And I want the commissioners to take responsibility, and everything that's been done so far has led to a commissioner having to be sacked, the Director General sacked, a number of people gone. But I want to see change, and I want to see accountability where there's culpability, whether it's collective responsibility or individuated, not to punish people further for what they didn't blow the whistle about, what they didn't raise the alarm about, or what they didn't do or should have done. Because I take responsibility for everything I do and say, and I sail the wind, many times in terms of the law to speak out. But I need people to not say, I was just doing my job. I couldn't speak. I was low on the line management. Some things are just wrong. But no one's going to tell me, and no one should tell anyone, that the fact that these guards fabricated the welfare checklist, cell checks, and they tick them off on 15-minute schedules. 9 o'clock the previous night, 9:15, 9:30, 10 o'clock, 10:15, 10:30, 10:45, 11, all the way till 6 a.m. in the morning, saying that they checked all the checklists. That's shocking. Are you telling me that's not misconduct of a criminal nature? I just don't believe that we haven't taken this to account further. And this is the sort of stuff we need. Because unless we take responsibility, and how are we going to change things? How are we going to make sure it doesn't happen again? Because a lot of things that have been said here too have also been said in the past. Some of the things that happened to Miss Jew in the Port Hedland cell were horrific. And accountability wasn't taken to the full extent as a citizen in other circumstance. That's not a public officer. It's not a police officer or a prison guard or a commissioner or the Director General of some government department. Why do they get off scot-free? And why do we citizens in general get punished and people obey the law in general? And what we've done by allowing all this non-accountability and people to get away with it in all these other institutions I talk about is for it to continue. The rogue behaviour continues. We allow for toxicity in culture.
Absolutely. And, I sit here in Irumagadu, Roban, where, may he rest in peace, John Pat was killed, which started the colonial inquest into the deaths in custody. So, yeah, it affects us all deeply, and it shouldn't just be blackfellas who are pushing for this change. It should be all Australians. We should want all our people to be able to have their children come home, have their people who are serving time come home and come out better.
Please put that to air, what you just said. Marli, that's incredible. You're the first in a long while to extend the collective responsibility further. And citizens of the nation are responsible for a lot of what actually happens and it left people behind, whether from a racist tirade or whether from a classist tirade. I can tell you that 100% of everybody that's in an adult prison and a juvenile detention facility are people that live in the lowest quintile or lowest fifth of income base. They're the poorest, they're the crushing poor. And black, brown and white, they're the crushing poor. 86% of the prison population does not have a year 12 completion.
Yeah.
And it's nearly 100% of First Nations in WA, First Peoples. But I think that speaks volumes. It's a classist tirade, and we've got to change that. There's a storm and a frustration that has to be ongoing. But we need to understand these things. We need to educate. We need to say this is not a black problem. The sins of the nation have actually created this disproportionality of poverty in our people. And, and with other brown and white brothers and sisters, we are seeing the poorest incarcerated. We need to change the classist narrative. We need to actually do more than what we've ever done before for these people that finish up and make these opportunities of transformation, of, changing their lives, of connecting them to supports that they'll have post-release on a 24/7 basis to get to where they've got to, as the Norwegians have done, as the Finnish have done, as the Swedish have done, as the Danish have done, as the Dutch have done. If they're doing it, why aren't we doing it? Why aren't we listening to the evidence-based? We talk about evidence-based, but we don't ever live it up. We want to go with ideologue, and in the end, governments, as some have said to me, they don't care because these people mostly don't vote. No, they're talking about the poor. They've got no incentive if you're in the lowest quintile. But the highest proportion of people that don't vote are people that I talk about in that last fifth of income base. Right, in the bottom 20%. So we got to keep on going on until we change the narrative. And what you said is beautiful, and I agree with you.
Because it takes the nation to change, and if they want change, they would make it happen, right?
Yes, it's about a political moral will. They don't have that political moral will at this time to make the change. We've got to force it. That's why we also have the class action going. And the class action is 2,000 plaintiffs now, 2,000 people who were, as kids were in Banksia Hill. And that's a lot because 20,000 have gone to Banksia Hill and more will come in. It's in the federal courts now this time. So it won't be just about compensability for those who went through the 2,000. Hopefully they get something they deserve they can spend on doing some good. Hopefully they don't blow it, but that's aside. We can't be, mission managers of what they do or don't do. And the other part is to compel reforms. So if the government wants to settle this matter, they need to compensate these kids to have some shot at opportunity in life. And some of them are adults now. And we need reforms. The class action didn't just happen for compensability. It happened so we can get reforms to change what is foreseeable. That the failures of today will take the lives of young ones and even as older ones. Because post-release, from Banksia since 1997. There have been more than 100 deaths by suicide in the first year post-release because they had no hope. And I know of 15
That's just terrible, isn't it?
That's horrific. And we call ourselves a nation that's about human rights. We talk about the human rights of others, but we talk about it in tokenistic terms. You've got to live it and breathe it. You've got to make it your policy. You've got that policy to translate human rights and action. And we don't have that, Marli. We have a load of bullshit that just comes out all the time. And I'm sorry to speak like that, but that's just the way it is. It's just all bull that comes from government ministers and ministers. If you expect change, I've tried to get into politics a few times. I got close by 600 votes to becoming a senator in 2013. But what I've seen is you can't get change inside. And you get more change, and a lot of the things that do happen because of people power and happen because of the narratives on the outside and happen because of other change agents doing things. And even the work that I've done on the outside, I can never do on the inside of systems. That's why I, chosen, even though I've worked in Banksia Hill, even though I've worked in Acacia Prison, the largest population of incarcerated people, for 9 months in reduced suicidality to its record low ever of First Peoples and also non-Indigenous brothers and sisters. I can't do what I can on the outside, on the inside. And I've got to also see that of them, but we've got to take them on because they're the ones we've got to still get them to see their way. But I look at politicians in Scandinavian countries, and they've changed their ways. They listen to the people. They all take public transport to work. They don't take flash cars all the way. They all travel economy. They all earn less than $100,000 a year. We got people who never had any experience in any specialist work in life become politicians on the back of some preference flows and things like that. And they're earning $250,000 to $500,000. And what have they done in their lives to brief them up for the work they're doing? Most of them have done nothing of any consequence. They're being party political animals and opportunists. And there's a few good ones that say all the right things, but there's no seasoned expertise. You shouldn't be a politician unless you've worked at the coalface and, even and have a level of education that, helps you extend the knowledge you've picked up at the coalface. But, we got the blind leading the blind, and the ones that can see are just demonized.
Absolutely. And proceeds from the book will go toward Cleveland's headstone and his siblings' education. What does that gesture mean to you personally, and what do you hope Cleveland's legacy will achieve for other Aboriginal children caught in the system?
Well, people that I feel, I've never worried about money all my life. I just live within my means. And I just do what I do. I could have a whole different life if I wanted to go a different way, but most people go. That is not how I'm wired. But I felt people who have got compensation, and they haven't all listened to me over that, but the ones that did, they got a house, and that's helped stabilise their family, own their own home. They've got their kids into boarding school. They don't have parents. You've got grandmothers taking care of some over that. And I've got kids into Adelaide boarding schools, into St. Joseph's in Darwin, and other places, because they need that opportunity. A lot of these kids in these towns I described don't go to school or don't go to secondary school. And life's going to be hard. Life's going to be hard if you don't have the education. I've talked to Nadine about, she loves her kids close, and 2 of her daughters are schooling, and that's good. And we just got to make sure all the kids get the schooling that they deserve, because they've got to navigate 2 cultural settings, out of the mainstream and out of their historical identity, which is also their contemporary identity. But contemporaneously, they've got to manage navigation of these 2 settings. And we got to give them every opportunity. And what I'd like to see is children, siblings of the brother, Cleveland, his spirit eased, go to boarding school, have a specialist caseworker support them, and we afford that, so they can be 24/7 nurture or thereabouts, that is, and have that opportunity at life. And these children, Cleveland was immersed in cultural longings that other children who are First Peoples don't have. A lot of kids that I know and a lot of individuals I know of First Peoples have been so disconnected that they don't know their bloodlines, they don't know the mapping of their families, they have longings about their culture but don't have anyone to help them. More coming out of the woodworks to help as many as they can, but there's a tsunami of these kids left behind. But then, contrary to that, is Cleveland, who was immersed in culture, who had a love of elders, who loved the desert, who loved these communities, who loved the storytelling and all that. And Nadine's children have all that. But what they don't have is the education that they also need to have to complement their opportunities to have life that they can afford and move away from the trappings that, for instance, the father Wayne and the mother Nadine didn't have because of poverty. Mm-hmm. It would mean a lot to me, and it would mean even more to Nadine, and because she's the one that brought them into the world, into life. It would mean a lot to the families. Just imagine if they get tertiary education and they do great and wonderful things, and you've got individuals in tertiary education or First Peoples who already have culture embedded and the knowledge of their culture, and they can pass that knowledge on to not just other Yamaji students who are at university, but First People students who are Badi, who are Yaru, who are Nuna, who are Wongai, and inspire them to get the cultural education they need to get from their mobs, or to just complement them and just make them that more resilient, because no part of identity should be a liability, as the sins of the nation actually have for us. Our identities, whether my heritage and my cultural identities and the Australian identity, all inform each other. We can't have the oppressor trying to extinguish and homogenise identity. We've got to know our roots, and that goes for everybody.
That was Gerry Georgatos. There will be more music to come after these messages.
You're listening to Ngaarda Radio.